The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 249.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
Is when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Braveheart team.
Change, my dear, and it seems not a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding.
Physician healers.
Wearing a bit thin.
Fantastic.
I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the second Doctor story, The Enemy of the World. And joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Stika. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going, Dom?
Very well, thank you. And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Excited about this one. I like this one.
Yes, same here. We'll get into that in a bit. This is really good. But first, I want to encourage the listener to join the StarQuest fan club by texting StarQuest to 66866. That's StarQuest to 66866. And join the StarQuest fan club. I also want to let you know about another show on the network that you definitely want to listen to. And I'd be shocked if any of our Secrets of Doctor Who listeners are not yet listening to this, because you really, if you are a Secrets of Doctor Who fan, you're going to like this. And that's Jimmy Aiken's Mysterious World. Where Jimmy talks about, and I, but mostly Jimmy, talk about mysteries, natural, supernatural, from the perspectives of faith and reason. A lot of fun. There's so much cool stuff going on. So many X-Files-ish or what are the other Doctor Who-ish sort of things that we could talk about. All kinds of stuff. We really have a lot of fun talking about it. And like recently, we talked about the conspiracies surrounding 9/11 attacks, the anniversary of that just happened last month. And so it's, check it out.
All of space and time, the entire universe.
Exactly. So find it wherever you find podcasts or at sqpn.com/mysterious. But today we are talking about this second Doctor story. And Jimmy, could you give us a recap of Enemy of the World?
The second Doctor, Jamie and Victoria, arrive in Australia in the year 2018, when a man from Mexico named Salamander is trying to become dictator of the world, taking it over by blackmail and murder one world zone at a time. It so happens that Salamander looks exactly like the second Doctor, and people who are opposed to Salamander want the Doctor's help to stop him by impersonating him. But the Doctor isn't sure who's right and who he should trust in the conflict, and he insists on having proof. We eventually learn that Salamander has a group of people he's been keeping underground for the last 5 years, having told them that there's a nuclear war happening on the surface. These people are innocently and unwittingly help him cause natural disasters, like volcanoes going off, to assist with his plan, which they think is helping to end the nuclear war. In the final episode, it's revealed that the leader of Salamander's opposition, a man named Giles Kent, has been secretly in league with him from the beginning. Kent wants to kill Salamander and take his place as dictator of the world, even though he previously seemed like the good guy. But this plan fails, and he tries to kill both himself and Salamander by setting off an explosion. That also fails, and Salamander turns the tables by pretending to be the Doctor and sneaking aboard the TARDIS. He and the Doctor finally come face to face, and he tries to kill the Doctor, but when the TARDIS is launched, Salamander is sucked out into the time vortex, never to be seen again, at least on the TV show. The end.
The end. I am sure there's a big Finish production where Salamander shows up again. So, couple of behind-the-scenes bits about this story. It's the only story in this season of the second Doctor season that doesn't follow the base under siege format, monster format. So
yay. They realize they can do something different.
Yeah. Yes. And I have to say, I I really liked this one.
Yeah.
The other point I want to bring up was that until 2013, all but one of the episodes was missing from the BBC archives, and they found it in, I want to say Nigeria.
Nigeria,
They
found
episodes.
it like a relay station in Nigeria, and it completed the entire series. So then they released it along with Web of Fear, the next story, if I remember. I think it is the next story.
Yeah.
And that's missing one episode, but they found all the other episodes there. And so they released it digitally. This was the first serial, recovered serial that was released digitally via iTunes when iTunes was still a thing.
Yeah.
I remember Apple made a big deal out of it. BBC made a big deal out of it. You could buy it. And so, I was one of the people that bought it when it first came out. And it was so great to get to see this episode that had been lost for, at that point, 40 years, and were able to sit and watch.
I also got it and Web of Fear when they first came out on iTunes. And I remember before they came out, there was a rumor that they had actually found all of the missing episodes from Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm.
It turned out to only just be these two serials, but they were still great to get.
Yeah.
Given 2013, that's sort of momentous in this event. That was the 50th anniversary. So a lot was happening in 2013 with all that. That's actually kind of cool.
And that was part of what fed into they found everything, and they're going to release it for the 50th anniversary.
That would have been nice. That's in an alternate timeline, I think.
And for those who aren't aware, there's an active group of people that are searching for lost episodes. They've now I think as years go on, the hope gets less and less, but there are people who are currently still searching for these. They're checking old TV stations where Doctor Who had been sent to by the BBC after it originally aired. They're checking private collections.
Fans' illegal collections,
stuff like that. Yeah,
exactly.
So there are people that are trying to find these episodes that are missing, and this is one of them where they were able to find basically the entire serial.
Right. Back in the early days, in the 60s, they were basically junking. The BBC wouldn't save these episodes; they just throw them out, which drives you crazy now.
They saved them for about 10 years, and then in the 70s they go, "Hey, we've got all these videotapes we're never going to use again, or these shows on these videotapes we're never going to use again, but we can reuse the videotapes. Let's do that."
Yes.
Yeah, and it wasn't just from Doctor Who they were doing this. It was from all of their older shows, in part because they were in black and white and things like that. They weren't going to be rebroadcasting them. And there's a lot of British television from the 50s and 60s that's missing as a result.
Yeah.
Yep.
Who's ever going to want to watch this again in 50 years?
Yeah, exactly.
So thankfully they're recovering it wherever they sent out the reels all over the world to the various English-speaking parts of the world. They're finding them in these little out-of-the-way archives, all dusty and such, and in other places like that. So I'm grateful that we're finding these and can watch them, and because this, like we said, this was a really fun story.
Mm-hmm.
This was, and it's unlike a lot of other Doctor Who.
Yeah, it's also a 6-parter, but it moves really fast for a 6-parter, and it's got this twist in episode 6 that's big.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you normally don't get a twist like that in episode 6. It's also really nice to see Patrick Troughton having a chance to be evil.
Yeah.
And it seems like in the salamander scenes, they've got him in bronzer or something to fake suntan, since he's supposed to be from Mexico. But but he does a passable accent as salamander. I mean, for a vaguely Mexican sounding accent, and it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Salamander himself is more complex than you'd think, because even though he is this murderous dictator wannabe, is exploiting these people he's got in this underground shelter. You also get the sense that he kind of cares for the people in the underground shelter. He's been bringing them food all this time, and he's friendly with them in a way he's not with other folks.
I found that Patrick Troughton's acting was really good in this. I mean, I feel like he played not just 2 characters. I feel like he played 3 characters, in the sense of he played the Doctor, he played Salamander, and then he played the Doctor being Salamander, which wasn't exactly the same as Salamander. And I thought that was a really clever and subtle bit of acting that he had.
The accent was a little bit different. Obviously, the mannerisms were a little bit different. So he was able to pull it off pretty well.
Yeah.
This episode also fed into, if you deep dive into the fandom, there you will run across discussions of why do we have repeating faces in the Hooniverse?
Uh-huh.
Oh, sure.
Because the first Doctor was a dead ringer for like this abbot at the time of the French Revolution. And here
Right.
the second Doctor is a dead ringer for Salamander, and of course the 12th Doctor is famously a dead ringer for this Roman guy.
Mhm.
And the same thing happens with other characters too. It's not just
Yep.
the Doctor. And
Yeah.
so there are fan essays devoted to how many faces actually exist in the Doctor Who universe and how often do they repeat and
Yeah.
why.
Because there's only so many British actors.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, we actually have that in this episode because Bennick, the head of the research station, I was going to say power station because that's where they filmed it at, but the research station also played the astronaut in the Android Invasion, the Fourth Doctor story, the Android Invasion.
Right.
And he was also Castellan in, which was the story? It's another
yeah.
Invasion of Time.
Mhm. Really.
So again, another one.
He effectively portrays really slimy guys.
He does it well.
He was creepy with a bad haircut. That haircut was awful.
Yes. Beetle mop top fail.
But yeah, I mean, it's like someone took scissors at an angle. He was like a toddler who got hold of the scissors. It was not a good haircut. The other thing that you mentioned, Jimmy, is that this takes place around 2018, which is kind of fun, obviously, since we're recording this a few years afterwards. But I always enjoy seeing the 60s, this paleofuturism, this idea of, looking back at what the past thought the future would be when you're living in that time. And the 60s often looked to the early 21st century as this, the beginning of the new millennium was a thing. And so just to see what they thought we would be like, and certainly we're nowhere as different, I think, as often that the 60s thought we would be in some ways, and yet our technology is so much further than in some ways that they imagined.
Yeah, they got the technology significantly right in at least 3 cases in this. I was taking notes on that. One of them is they have cell phones.
Yep.
There's a moment in the story where Astrid, who is Giles Kent's assistant and is like this action lady super spy without being a
awesome.
spy.
Yeah,
I know. She's great. But she's gone to the Central European zone and is talking to the Australasian zone, which is where the story starts. And she's got, it looks like a walkie-talkie, but she's using it to place a call to a terrestrial phone in Australia. And so that's a cell phone. They also note they've got some sunspot interference, which is, something you can have. But they've got cell phones. They also have FaceTime.
Yep.
Because they talk to each other over TV screens occasionally. And they have something that is currently in the planning stages, which is basically suborbital rockets for passenger travel.
Right.
Yeah.
We're told that you can get from the Australasian zone to the Central European zone in 2 hours by rocket. And right now, we could have these now if we wanted them, but they actually are under development now of suborbital flights to get places really quickly like that.
Yep.
One thing the 60s thought we would have, which I kind of wish we did, was more hovercraft. Like hovercraft was a thing in the 60s, and we really should. I really wish we had more hovercraft.
Well, it was such a cool new technology back then that they knew that we were going to keep with it.
Right. The problem with hovercraft is you need very flat ground. It doesn't do well on any kind of rough surface.
Yeah.
So it really on beaches, which is what this happens is on a beach. Speaking of the beach, the Doctor immediately lands in Australia and sees a beach and decides, I'm going swimming, which Victoria is aghast at this because her her Victorian values of the age she comes from, swimming was bad for you. Like it was a health at risk to go bathing, which was kind of funny to see.
And it sometimes still is, depending on the water you're using.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
In Australia, it could be really bad because of what's living in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love how that opening sequence where the Doctor is just instantly childlike, and he's telling Jamie and Victoria to go in the TARDIS and see if they can find buckets and spades. And Jamie doesn't understand what for, and Victoria explains that the Doctor wants to make sandcastles.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Doctor is stripping off his clothes, and he's got this long john underwear underneath that he then just plunges into the sea and frolics.
Yeah.
And is having this great time. And I love seeing this aspect of it. And then it's finally interrupted when the hovercraft arrives with these people who want to kill Salamander and think he's the second Doctor, and they've got these fake Aussie accents. so that are so bad even my American ear can detect them. And so welcome to the club, Australia. You also now get the BBC treatment.
Yep.
Right. Now the guy who plays Giles Kent, he's real Australian, so that worked. But the rest were not real. Speaking of the Doctor frolicking, it's interesting because there's no way you'd see the first Doctor like that or the third Doctor. You might see the fourth Doctor frolicking in the ocean, kind of crazy like that. So
although he would be equally likely to just make non sequitur snide remarks about the ocean.
This is true. Seventh Doctor, maybe. Sixth Doctor, I doubt it. So it's kind of interesting to see the different personalities and the way that they play the Doctor like this in different ways.
Now, Matt Smith would have just dove right in, but.
Yes, right. Matt Smith would have. The Ninth Doctor, not. Capaldi, certainly not. So, a lot of fun. So, speaking of Astrid, so she's the one who rescues them in her personal helicopter. She comes by and picks them up, and she wants to know what kind of doctor he is.
Yeah, and by the way, it's because of her helicopter we know what year it is, because there's a license in the helicopter that we see on the back of the helicopter cockpit that says license expires December 31st, 2018.
Yep.
Right. That's right. So it's sometime around 2018. Yeah, and but you mentioned Astrid. I really liked that character. She was really good. I mean, she was kicking butt. She had agency. I mean, she was the one who figures out at the end what's really going on with Giles Kent and the people and the people underground, that he's the one who brought them there on behalf of Salamander in the first place. So I really liked that character, and she would make a great great companion for the Doctor. Reminds me of a lot of different ones.
She has handgun skills and martial arts skills and wears interesting futuristic fashions.
Yeah. She was quite attractive, that's for sure. And so she worked out. So anyway, Astrid and Giles Kent. Now the Doctor doesn't trust Giles Kent right off the bat.
This is something I really liked, and I had it in my notes in episode 1. It'd been a long time since I saw this, so I didn't remember the Giles Kent twist.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I remembered, the underground people and everything like that. But I liked and noted how the Doctor is actually being prudent when we show up in this political situation, and he doesn't automatically trust the opposition to Salamander.
Right.
And he wants proof and he challenges things he's told about Salamander and how bad he is. It's like, is there some other way to look at this? How do I know you're telling me the truth? And they keep that up for episodes. Now, it kind of recedes a little bit after the first one as the story gets moving, but they keep bringing it up. And what it's ultimately doing is it's setting up the final episode twist. But I like the fact that instead of just trusting the first people that seem friendly, the Doctor realizes there are serious stakes here, and I can't just throw in my lot with one side prematurely. I really need to know what's going on with these people.
This is another case of where the earlier Doctors are not the know-it-alls that the later Doctors tend to be. He doesn't come in and say, oh, well, yes, of course, the early 21st century, this was this and that and everything else. And he knows everything that's going on and sort of, is the smartest guy in the room all the time. I mean, he was unsure of what's going on. He didn't really know what the situation was. And he hadn't been here, apparently, at least in this particular time period. And I like that. I like the limited Doctor in that sense, because it provides more drama and more interesting interactions with the characters.
Yeah, you can imagine the new Doctor's like, oh yeah, I've heard of Salamander and he did all these things and I got to stop him. And it'd be like a 1 hour episode,
and then
45-minute episode.
We'd get a nice speech about, values and human rights and stuff.
So, yeah, and there's, as usual in this era, a refreshing lack of preaching
Yes.
in
Mhm.
the episode. So, the way the world is set up in this episode, apparently the United Nations has been replaced by something called the World Zone Authority, well, called the United Zones.
Mhm.
Yes.
So, you have these groups of countries that are classified as different zones, like the Australasian zone and the Central European zone and the Eastern European zone. And they're united in something called the World Zone Authority. And each zone has its own controller who has a local bureaucracy. And Giles Kent is the disgraced former head, I gather, of the Australasian zone.
Mhm.
And we then meet the leader of the Central European zone, who's a guy named Denis, who's from Hungary. And Salamander is trying to replace him. He goes to Denish's second in command, a guy named Federin, who he has some evidence that he can blackmail him with. And he blackmails Federin into attempting to kill Denis so
Mhm.
that Federin can take his place. But since Salamander has the blackmail info, Federin will be under Salamander's thumb, and he's apparently been taking over the world one zone at a time,
Mhm.
like this, with blackmail and murder. Ultimately, Federin does not kill Denis, and so Salamander kills Federin.
Mhm.
Right.
So he's very ruthless. We also have the head of security for the World Zone Authority, a man named Bruce, who is rather stern, but turns out to be a good guy.
Yeah, that was a
The
surprise.
yeah, the doctor realizes after meeting him he is a man of honesty and integrity who can be trusted once you show him that you really do have the world's best interests at heart. So that's a nice bit of complexity. In terms of one of the things that's driving Salamander's rise to power, because this was filmed in the 60s, there was this assumption we're going to have massive world food shortages in the future,
Mm.
which was a big concern at the time. And so Salamander has invented something, and this is also typical of this era of Doctor Who, some new technological invention that is important to the plot, but we don't really see a lot of it. Uh, Salamander has invented something called the Mark 7 sun catcher. And what it does is it stores sunlight in concentrated form and then can re-release it. And what that does for you is it allows you to grow 3 or 4 crops of food per summer.
Mm.
So, and presumably in winter too, but they mention 3 or 4 crops a summer. And in places of the world that are normally too cold for that. So they refer to the Great Canadian Wheat Plains and the Great Ukrainian Wheat Plains.
Mhm.
And they've got 10,000 robot harvesters producing 50 million tons of flour a day or something like that.
Mm.
Right.
Yes, we call them heat lamps now. Just
Yeah.
kidding.
Giant. Well, these are very,
Giant-
very, very big,
Yeah.
giant
Very
heat
big
lamps.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, I'm pretty sure that they actually do grow wheat in Canada and the Ukraine.
Yeah, they-
but,
Yes.
Yeah,
but,
they actually they grow wheat just north of me. I mean,
Yeah.
about like
Uh-huh.
200 miles north of me, they grow wheat in Canada. So yeah, they
I guess-
absolutely do.
Yeah.
I guess the
But
idea is they grow multiple crops of it.
That yeah.
And they name these cold places with a colder reputation for
Mhm.
impressiveness.
Right.
Exactly.
So I like that Salamander is not a cartoonish or campy bad guy. He's a serious villain. I mean, he's got
Mhm.
they treat him seriously. Like the whole story is very James Bond-ish. It's got
Mhm.
that very
Mhm.
super spy sort of vibe. But he's not like, I don't know.
Yeah, only with more pleather clothing.
Well,
Yeah.
that's true. That's true. But he's not like, I'm trying to think of like Bond villains, like Goldfinger.
He's not sitting there
who's kind of over the top.
stroking a cat as you're going to die now, Mr. Bond.
I expect you to die. No, yeah, he's not Blofeld, that sort of thing. He's much more serious character. So that was interesting. Salamander also has this servant who works for him. Her name is Faria, his food
Yeah.
taster.
She's great too. I like
Oh,
her.
yeah.
And at one point she hates him, and he's got some hold over her, and they never tell us what exactly it is, which is sort of refreshing. I mean, you don't need to reveal every single detail about everybody, but you just know she hates him. She has to work for him, and at one point calls him a brujo, which I remember from Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World when we talk about zombies. That's a Haitian word for sorcerer.
Actually, that's Bokor. Brujo is Spanish for a warlock or sorcerer.
Oh, okay. So,
And
right.
Bruja is witch.
And they even say it in line in the episode of it's where he's from. That's what they call sorcerers.
Okay, so Spanish.
Of course, he's
for
from
sorcerer.
Mexico, so.
Oh, okay. I see. That's what I got confused in my mind where I heard it. So I must have heard it somewhere, but yeah, but brujo. So he's got some kind of hold. Now he's not literally a sorcerer. We don't see him performing magic, but he does some sleight of hand sort of things.
He's a political sorcerer.
Yeah,
right.
He's very, very quick and easy to manipulate other people.
I like how when Farina is talking to the Doctor and Giles Kent, she admits he's blackmailing her, and he blackmailed her into being his personal servant. And Giles Kent is like, well, what did he have on you? And the Doctor is like, everyone has their flaws. We don't need to know that.
Right. That was actually, I mean, just sort of brushes it off. We don't need to know. It would be an extra confusing detail we don't really need.
Yeah.
Now remember, it's not blackmail. It's comprehensive insurance.
Right. Comprehensive insurance.
By the way, another cold reference we have reflecting the Suncatcher, although they don't make a big deal out of it, is when Salamander poisons Federer to get rid of him. He poisons this wine made for him in Alaska.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
So they've got vineyards in Alaska now.
Yep.
And it's not ice wine, which is the thing.
Yeah.
So a couple of little bits. Bennick, we mentioned Bennick before, who's running the research center. Kent has set up a caravan, or what we would call a camper, on the outskirts of the research center so they can, spy on it. And Bennick sends a guard to, make him leave, to kind of give him an incentive to leave. So what does the guard do? He breaks all his crockery. How could I possibly stay now? All my crockery is broken. I
don't have any plates.
I can't make tea now. I mean, what am I going to do? I just thought that was a very funny little bit they put in there. Another little thing, a minor character that I enjoyed was Griff, the grumpy chef.
Oh yeah.
In the Central European zone. So Jamie and Victoria, the Doctor sends them to the Central European zone to collect with Astrid, to kind of spy and collect the evidence of Salamander's evil, so that the Doctor knows whether or not he should impersonate him. And Victoria basically has no skills, so they put her in the kitchen where she's peeling potatoes. But Jamie,
she even in the kitchen has no skills because she's from the upper class. They had servants to make their food in her house.
Yes.
So when Griff, the grumpy chef, is interviewing her, it's like, what do you know? She can describe food and vaguely what kind of ingredients are in it and how awesome it tasted, but she has no clue how to make it.
Right.
And so he says, get over there and start peeling those potatoes.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Jamie, the Scottish warrior, has proven his warrior abilities, and he's made a security guy through a setup.
Yeah, this is a great scene where Salamander is like on the porch of some building with security guards around, and he's talking to a guy, and Jamie bursts onto the porch and disarms one of Salamander's guards, and then holds Salamander at gunpoint. And says, hang on, you've got a bomb in your speakerphone. And he takes the speakerphone and throws it off the porch, at which point Astrid, who's in on the plot, sets off an actual bomb to make it look like the speakerphone was a bomb. And this was all an attempt to get Salamander that Jamie has now thwarted.
Right.
And Salamander is then disappointed with his own guard, but pleased with Jamie for having saved him and gives him a job as one of his guards.
Right, right. And so go Jamie.
Action really
Jamie.
Nice scene. Yeah. Also, I like around this point in the plot, we have Astrid calling back to Australia to tell Giles Kent that she is arranged to meet with the head of the Central European Zone under a disused jetty And the doctor is listening in and is like, a disused Yeti. And Giles Kent is like, Jetty.
Little callback there to a couple episodes ago.
And preview to next one.
Well,
right.
There's another callback because doctor's asking what's going on. Who's this salamander? And we've been out of touch. We've been on ice, you might say. The previous episode was the Ice Warriors.
That's right. So I also thought it was interesting. So Dinesh is like we said, the leader of the Central European Zone, and as a part of a way to convince him to fall under Salamander's control, Salamander has volcanoes go off
in Hungary.
And to kind of prove how Dinesh is just incapable and needs his help. And so it goes off, and there's presumably devastation and lots of people dying because they don't really usually have volcanoes in Hungary.
And they talk about all those poor people who are dying.
And then they kind of blasé, and at one point Dinesh is arrested, but let's get him a nice steak dinner. And it's like everyone's kind of blasé about this disaster that's going on as we speak, and nobody really cares very much about the people. I don't know whether that was an intentional way of showing that pretty much everybody in control here is not all that invested in the well-being of the people around them, but are all invested in power for its own sake, even the so-called good guys. I don't know if that was intentional or just we left it out of the story because we didn't want to go there.
I think it's a reflection of the upper class of the class system at the time and earlier that they're coming out of, where the upper class really is kind of concerned with itself and does have compassion for the lower classes, but also isn't gonna lose too much sleep over it.
Right.
But because we're fellow upperclassmen, we're going to treat each other a certain way. So the prisoner gets steak dinners and doesn't need to be put in a cell, just guarded and things like that.
Yeah. So, and then later on,
whether that's meant to be satire or not, I don't know.
Right. So later on, when you mentioned about how the security chief Bruce turns. At first, I was a little confused by that. I'm like, why would he seemed so much in Salamander's camp. And I guess in my mind, I thought, if he's that high up under Salamander, he must know what Salamander is, what kind of guy he is, and wouldn't be turned by someone saying, no, look, he's a bad guy. You shouldn't follow him.
Yeah. I saw it coming, but I think they could have set it up better. They describe him initially as if he's like Salamander's head of security.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think he may be the head of security for the World World Zone Authority.
That's correct.
What tipped me off, though, was in his interactions with Salamander, it's clear that he doesn't spend a lot of time with Salamander and is not one of his intimate confidants.
Right.
There are regularly things that Bruce complains to Salamander about not knowing. And why are you doing it this way? Why aren't we doing it this other way? And so it was clear to me that they weren't just like buddies on the same page.
Yeah.
Well, the first time we see him is when he's interacting with the doctor. In the first time the doctor is impersonating Salamander, and they're arguing.
Right.
Bruce is arguing from the beginning, and if he was a security guy that was under Salamander's thumb, he might put up a token objection, but you wouldn't actually sit there and argue with him about these things. So that was kind of a hint that this wasn't quite he's the security guy directly under Salamander, but he's responsible for Salamander security just as the World Zone Authority's security leader.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Jamie and Victoria end up getting revealed and arrested and sent back to the Australasian zone where they're going to be tortured by Bennick.
Yeah. Now there's also an interesting jump because normally we have a cliffhanger, at the end of every episode, and then we pick up immediately after the cliffhanger. We actually back up a little bit in time. Right. And this had a couple of interesting things with the cliffhangers. One is that they're not all somebody is in immediate danger. Sometimes it's just a dramatic revelation. Then also there's three interesting things about the cliffhangers in this serial. The second is we actually, because we get to at least I watched them back to back, and because they're all there, I could tell, hey, they refilmed this cliffhanger coming
Right.
into the next episode. They're not just playing the tape over again. This is something that was common in serial fiction of the time. I remember as an adult going back and watching The Dark Shadows or some of the Dark Shadows soap operas that I watched as a 5-year-old because they had vampires and werewolves in them.
Yeah.
And it's very clear on Dark Shadows, when you come back the next day, they're just refilming this scene. They're not playing videotape for you of what they filmed previously. And so you can pick up little differences in the actor's performance and in the, the shots and stuff. And you could see that here in this serial too. The third interesting thing is that coming out of episode 2 and into episode 3, there's a big time jump.
Yeah.
You have we're not coming back to the same moment. It is sometime later. And that to me was unique. I don't recall that happening else in other Doctor Who serials where, you had a cliffhanger and then, and now it's sometime later.
Well, and episode 3 was the one that was that they had previously. So I'm wondering if maybe there was some reason why there was part cut off of it, like the cliffhanger part was cut off of it at some point, and that's why it was, because it was kind of a stark jump from the end of the cliffhanger of the second one to all of a sudden the start of the third. I mean, obviously at the opening credits or whatever. But I wonder if there was some reason why that little bit of the cliffhanger of them being captured and being sent back was cut for some reason. It's possible that's how the storyline actually went too, though. I mean, just for some reason they did it a little bit differently. I don't know, but it just, it was very noticeable. And throughout the serialization era of Classic Who, it was very common for them to refilm the cliffhangers. Because sometimes they would play through the whole cliffhanger. Sometimes right at the end of the cliffhanger, it would immediately change. It would change just a little bit. But this one was very noticeable. The third episode.
Yeah, it worked for me. It just was noticeable. It's like, oh wait, we're not back at the same moment.
Right. So when Benek is going to torture Jamie and Victoria, the Doctor comes in as Salamander with Bruce, and he's going to try to prove to Bruce that what he's been telling them about Jamie and Victoria and himself is true by provoking them as Salamander. And it's a fun and interesting little scene that he has to kind of go through, and in fact at the end ends up, Jamie, stop, it's me, the Doctor.
Don't hit me.
Because he's and in fact has to go ahead.
He pretends to play the recorder to show him, because of course he left the recorder in the TARDIS on Jamie's orders, but he pretended to play the recorder to show that it was really him.
Right.
And Bruce is like, "What's a TARDIS?" It's just a place that's common to all three of us.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I really did like that scene because they don't set it up in any way. They just have Patrick Troughton and Bruce waltz into the room where they're holding Jamie and Victoria about to be tortured, and they get the torture guy Benek out of there, and then Patrick Troughton continues to be Salamander, and provokes Jamie and Victoria, and it does reveal to Bruce that these people are not just terrorists.
So I mentioned earlier that Astrid does find out what's really going on with the people in the fallout shelter, the bunker. She ends up, in fact, finding her way in there through a tunnel. The Salamander had killed the leader when he figured out that he'd been lied to.
Right. We should probably talk about the bunker. So Salamander at the research station in Australia there's this records room, and Salamander can go in there to work on the records privately. These are I guess where he has a lot of blackmail information on people, and nobody is allowed in there. In fact, when he's in there, and in fact, the locks work such that once they're switched over, they can only be opened from the inside. So nobody can get in and interrupt him. And what he's really doing is he's got a secret panel to a room that it's basically like a Forbidden Planet scale elevator down into the ground. And he'll get in this elevator and go down and meet with the people underground. And there are visible differences between the people who live underground and the people who live overground. A part of this is conveyed by the costuming. the people above ground are wearing these sparse, vaguely militaristic fashions, frequently made out of vinyl.
Mm-hmm.
And the people underground are actually wearing cloth clothing with prints.
Yep.
So they have a much softer feel and a much more organic feel than the people living on the surface. Some of them have been down there. They've all been down there for 5 years, but some of them were teenagers when they went down there, and now they've grown up and are dissatisfied. And they was like,
Right.
why can't we go back to the surface? I just want to see it. But Salamander is telling them it's devastation up there. There's radiation. For some reason, he's able to survive the radiation and bring them food, but other people, they talk like if you go up there, you'll die from the radiation.
Mhm.
And eventually, the guy who's in charge down there, a guy named Swan, is unloading supplies that Salamander has brought them. He's like, put them on a conveyor belt, and so everyone's taking the supplies off the conveyor belt. And on one of the boxes, there's a torn piece of newspaper with a date from the previous year, so from 2017. And we also do, I guess, see the 2017 date on it.
Right.
And we're told it's from last year, so that would be further evidence we're in 2018. And it's about a holiday liner sinking.
Yep.
And he's like, if there's a nuclear war up there, how is there a holiday liner traveling around, and why would it be news that a holiday liner has sunk
exactly
in the middle of a nuclear war?
Right.
And so Swan convinces and kind of forces Salamander to take him to the surface, and Salamander then slugs him with a lead pipe and leaves him to die.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
At which point Astrid finds him because she's found a tunnel down into the underground facility.
Yeah.
One thing I like is the makeup that they did for the people underground. They look very pale, very gaunt, dark underneath, dark bags underneath their eyes. They look like haven't seen the sun in 5 years. I mean, they look, and they've had not very good diets because, of course, salamanders, not feeding them luxuriously to try to make it look like, oh, it's so hard to find food, but I'm able to go out there and find food for you and things like that. Although, but of course, that's part of the lie is he has basically a budget, and they bring that up. Why in this place that has like a dozen people working in it is there a budget for feeding 30 people? So that's part of the lie, but they do a good job of making them look like they've lived underground on very malnutrition diets and things like that.
And even though it didn't involve malnutrition, after a year of COVID and eating out of cans and not going to the grocery store, I really sympathized with those people because as the boxes are coming off the conveyor belt, there's like one food item in every box.
Yep.
So it's like just here's a box of meat.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, in order to make an interesting meal, you need more than one ingredient.
Yeah.
But,
Right.
But
Yeah.
Spam.
These yeah.
Potted meat. Yeah. I really liked the young man, Colin, the one who was so insistent on being allowed to just see the sun. I just want to see the sun. And he was so insistent, and you could just feel for him because he's probably 21 years old. He was a teenager when they went down there. So let's say he was 16 when he went down there, and he hasn't seen the sun in 5 years, and he just wants to see the sun.
Dude, you're giving me COVID flashbacks.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that poor guy probably, if he's still around today, he probably had the same problem last year as we record. But wow, that would be actually interesting to talk to these actors now. Like, you were filming something that took place in 2018, and now in 2020, you actually did spend a year in lockdown. So how does that feel? Be honest with your feelings. It's for science. So, sorry, Princess Bride flashback. So Astrid does find out the true story, and the doctor ends up tricking Kent because Kent holds the doctor at gunpoint. And not knowing, Kent doesn't know that the camera's on and they're watching from outside. He tricks Kent into revealing that he was in on the plan. He's the one who got the people down into the shelter before the quote-unquote nuclear war started. And Salamander betrayed him because, and removed him from his office because Salamander knew that Kent was coming for his position.
Yeah.
And so
and the original reason they went down there into the shelter was it was for an endurance test in case there was an atomic war. And then it's like, oh, and guess what? There was. You get to stay down there now.
Right,
Yep.
right. So you get Kent and Salamander running around in the tunnels underneath at one point. Salamander shoots Kent, and Kent manages, having been gut shot, to turn and pull a lever that is a self-destruct for the research station.
Because remember, folks, being shot in the stomach is one of the slowest ways to die.
Yeah.
So
Right.
if you want to give your opponent time to pull the lever to blow you both up, that's where you want to shoot him.
Right.
And
Why he
I
didn't
think-
shoot him in the head, but yeah.
Or heart.
I didn't think we didn't mention what the people are doing down there. They're not just surviving the atomic war. They're the ones causing the natural disasters.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
They're the ones causing the volcanoes and the earthquakes and all this stuff. Somehow,
Thinking-
by some magic machine, they're able to make these disasters happen on Salamander's demand.
Yeah, we mentioned that briefly earlier. It's something I wish they'd explored a little bit more. They allude to why they're doing it. They think that by doing this, they're harming the enemies of world order, presumably the other side in the nuclear war they think they're in. But they could have spelled that out a little bit more. I wish they'd made that a little more concrete.
And that was one of the turning points for the people underneath, is when they realized there wasn't a war. At first they thought the war was over because Salamander got confronted, and then later realized there hadn't been a war. Then they realized that Salamander was having them kill people for his
Innocents.
power instead of
Right.
to actually end the war.
Yeah.
And that's what really turned them against him and caused them to.
I also like it when Astrid gets down into the bunker, because she comes through the tunnels, she finds Swan, and he dies, but tells her to resist Salamander because now he knows Salamander's a bad guy, and she vows she'll do that. And she then he also tells her that there are more people down there. So she keeps going, and she finds the bunker. And when she gets into the bunker, they immediately attack her because they're afraid she's radioactive.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And she's got to explain, no. There has been no war. What are you talking about? Salamander has been lying to you.
Yeah.
And there's really nice drama as she's trying to convince them, and they're afraid she's this radioactive woman who's come and contaminated their living space.
Well, they put her in the decontaminator that Salamander has, which is really a fake, box that has a dial that whenever you pass the invisible beam, it says, "Oh, you're full of radiation," and then the dial goes down again as it quote unquote sucks the radiation out of you. And she's like, "Look, I'll put a ruler through it. Is the ruler radioactive?"
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, because one of their rulers they've had down there this whole time. So
Exactly.
she proves no, he's been faking this radiation from the surface stuff.
Right. And as you mentioned, Jimmy, in the recap, Salamander almost gets away with getting onto the TARDIS, pretending to be the Doctor, and trying to get them to
away
take
with
off.
that part.
Well, yes. He's trying to get Jamie and Victoria to activate the TARDIS and fly away in it. And Jamie's like, "But Doctor, you said never to touch the controls. I don't know what I'm doing, And Salamander says nothing because he doesn't want to give away his accent because he hasn't figured out how to do the Doctor, apparently. And that's when the real Doctor shows up, and they have this tussle. And like you mentioned, Salamander falls out into the time vortex.
I was wondering as we were getting close to episode 6, because I didn't remember the details. Are the Doctor and Salamander going to meet? Because, I mean, if you have the same actor playing two parts, you want them to meet.
Right.
You want a conflict between them. And I was thinking as we're getting close to episode 6, I'd remembered someone get sucked out into the time vortex, but I didn't remember it was Salamander in this episode. But as we're getting close to the end, I'm thinking, the limitations of children's television at the time might have been such that we're not going to have the kind of face-to-face encounter that this kind of story calls for. I remember even years later in the 1980s, when they do the Will and Thomas Riker episode of The Next Generation, and it had been done for a while that you would have one actor appearing on screen with him or herself. I mean, that's the premise of the Patty Duke show, where they would use split screen and stand-ins, so you'd see the face of the actor or actress and the back of the head of their stand-in. But it was always clunky. And so when they did the Will and Thomas Riker episode of Next Gen, it was impressive to the audience that now digital technology had got to the point that Jonathan Frakes is not only able to appear on screen with himself, but to like walk around himself.
Yeah.
That was impressive. And that was like a first in TV history, to have that kind of interaction between the actor playing two parts. And so I was thinking, as we get farther into this, the Doctor and Salamander may not meet, but then they finally do in the last episode. And we have them like nose to nose as they're wrestling over the TARDIS console before Salamander gets sucked into the time vortex, which is just so horrifying.
Right.
Yeah.
And we even see him, the camera follows him into the time vortex, and we see him plunging through it. And it's really effective. I really liked that.
Well, and the episode ends, this whole serial ends with them still trying to get control of the TARDIS and close the doors and trying to hold on and not get sucked out themselves. And so and that goes into the next one, the Web of Fear. So any other notes on this episode, this story, Father Cory?
So they show the volcano footage, and of course it's stock BBC volcano footage that they reuse in a couple more years for the opening to the Inferno, the episode Inferno. Right. It's the same exact volcano footage. Of course, that stuff's in color instead of that time. I got a kick out of when there's a scene where they're trying to distract the guards. Astrid, she's trying to escape and distract the guards, so she quote unquote kills Giles and uses ketchup for blood because of course ketchup looks exactly like blood.
Dumbest guard ever.
Exactly. I think that was all I had, but it was, like I said, I'm with you guys. I enjoyed this. This is a great episode. It's great that it is complete. It is. I've said it before. It is such a difference to watch these episodes, the full video as it was originally broadcast, instead of like a recreation and animation. Telesnaps especially just don't even cover it. It's great to see this entire episode, which is a great episode, in full video. The original broadcast. It's fantastic.
Yep. Jimmy?
There's another piece of reused footage in this, which is Astrid's helicopter. Even though she's not in it, it blows up at one point. And that's a bit of reused footage from a James Bond movie of the period.
Oh,
yeah.
Right,
now, those movies were in color, but this one, I guess they've taken the color out of it.
Yeah.
Also, there is a phone that they use, and I've seen it before. This is a futuristic looking phone. So it's not fully cordless, but there is like a cord that comes out of it, but the phone is built into one handset. There's not like a cradle you put it in. And it's a very interesting looking phone. I've seen it in other British sci-fi shows. Like I'm sure it's in The Prisoner.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
But it has
Space
a flat
1999 too. Yeah.
Yeah, it has a flat base so you can sit it on a table, and then it has a long arc, kind of almost flat but slightly arching extension that goes up, and together the two parts, which are just one solid body unit, you put it up to your ear. And it's very angular and sleek looking, and it is cool looking. I mean, it's not as good as an iPhone, but I wouldn't want one, but back in the day, it would have wanted one. It looks really nice. And I did some searching, and I found similar one-piece upright phones, but they were all much more rounded and organic looking than this. This is very angular and clean, and I wasn't able to find out what the brand name of it was.
So one of the bits of paleofuturism that was in this episode was that you mentioned that they have like Zoom or FaceTime or whatever you want to call it. It's kind of funny because until about 5, 6, 7 years ago, people had said, "Oh yes, the promise of video telephone, we're promised that for decades, starting in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and it's never going to happen." People decided we don't want to be on camera when we're on the phone. And then suddenly, bam.
Yeah.
Now it's Zoom and FaceTime everywhere. And it's kind of funny to see how quickly what we thought was a failed promise became reality because of various technologies and situations. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I've noticed even I've come around on that. I find myself when I want to meet people these days, like I want to see them. I don't just want to hear their voice. I mean, if it's a friend, it's not a big deal. I know them.
Right.
But if I'm meeting someone for the first time, it's like, can we set up a Skype or a Zoom?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to look the person in the eye as I get to know them.
Yes.
Right. Exactly.
So I want to mention something about the next second Doctor serial that we're going to be getting to when we come back around to that, which we mentioned before, The Web of Fear.
Unit.
Yes. Well, yeah. And the Brigadier shows up, except as Colonel, this one.
Yep.
Nicholas Courtney. And it's interesting. We mentioned that all but episode 1 of the serial were missing from the BBC archives and were found at the same time as those for The Enemy of the World. There was a new release of this episode of Web of Fear in this past August, as we record this in 2021, on DVD, Blu-ray, and Steelbook, which is a special DVD thing. And so it has an animation of the missing third episode. So they've recreated it. That's still missing. So in black and white and in color. So it will be nice when we get back around to that. I want to be able to talk about that as we come back around. So it's kind of nice that these sorts of things are still, as we've said, being found or recreated. And so it's a nice, if you can't watch as it was aired originally, at least getting that reconstruction and animation is fun.
Daleks Master Plan. Daleks
Yeah,
Master
exactly.
Plan.
Oh, that's gonna be a big one.
Yes.
But if you watch the 2013 release, the one that you would buy the same with the Enemy of the World, they did telesnap recreation for the third episode. So you have the full audio, but they're just doing the telesnaps. So again, that's not as good as the animation, but it still helps you to see what the story is.
It's also really good they found Enemy of the World because there were no telesnaps of this one.
Yeah, right. Interesting. Are there others that are just completely gone? I think we Marco Polo was missing.
Everything has audio.
Okay.
And most things have telesnaps, which allows fan recreations and stuff, and eventual animation. But nothing is completely gone down to the script level. We at least have audio of everything.
Oh, good. I think that should do it for our discussion today. As usual, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including William T., Mary Claire L., CD, Christopher B., and Raymond P. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And, of course, we'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week. So that's it from us. We want to hear from you. What did you think of The Enemy of the World? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the 11th Doctor story, The Rings of Akhenaten or Akhenaten? I think I wrote Akhenaten, but it's not Akhenaten. It's not an Egyptian pharaoh.
Yeah.
Until then, Jimmy Aiken, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Tom.
Father Cory Stika, thank you as well.
Thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, Redhead, is that your wife?
Right. This is going to be fun.